Hello Reapers, my name is Seth, and today we're going to be taking a look at some all-new gameplay of Pixark. I'm going to put a link in the description to the original 15 minutes of gameplay, but honestly speaking, the gameplay itself is maybe 8 to 10 minutes long, and the rest of it is just the person that's playing the game wandering around for some weird reason. I guess they just don't really know how to play video games, but either way, that does not mean that this is not extremely exciting to actually see some modern Pixark footage rather than just all of the old Chinese footage that we've been able to muster up from all the YouTube videos and stuff like that. So let's get right into it. Obviously, you can see right here that the game is going to end up running very, very smoothly. That's kind of one of the big things about Pixark, is it's going to require a lot less system requirements from your computer than it does with Ark. I don't like the fact that your character has to jump up each individual blocks like an idiot, but that begs the question, if you end up getting dinosaurs, they're going to be able to walk up blocks as if it's a staircase, and we get to see right here one of those procedurally generated quests that we ended up hearing so much about in the Steam page, where this little item container right here is going to end up generating with a quest where it's telling you to fight rigid dragons or something with like some primitive tools. Not exactly sure if that's going to end up being something very difficult to end up actually doing, but it still is really cool that it is actually in the game, and you can see in the top right that there is actually a quest system. So very, very cool that we get to see passive quests that you can end up doing out in the wild, which hopefully is going to end up adding that much more longevity to the gameplay itself. So if we skip in a little bit here, we can actually see the player wandering around the environment, which it looks a lot more beautiful when this game is when it's daylight, using a wooden axe, or maybe it's a stone axe, to actually chop down these trees. And the cool thing is that we actually see all of the same resources from Ark. Like, I'm actually very surprised. We'll explain more about that drill that you saw for 2 seconds in a moment, but you can see picking plants off the ground is going to give you all of the same berries, thatch, tindo berries, narco berries, and stuff like that. So we'll see whether these end up having the same functionality in Pixark as they did in Ark, because we know that knocking creatures out is going to end up being something a little bit different than it was in Ark, because we've seen characters actually using electricity to knock creatures out rather than using narco berries to end up making tranquilizers. Here's something really interesting though. The way that you get flint is just directly off of the ground. So normally in Ark, you would have to use a pickaxe on a rock in order to get flint, whereas now we get to see that we're just using it on the ground on these blocks that just look like gravel blocks. I would assume if you end up using an axe on this same block, that's how you're going to end up actually getting rocks in your inventory. But I don't know, we're just going to have to wait and see what ends up happening. Now, this is where things get really interesting, because we're going to get to see the crafting menu right here. And we're going to talk about each of these different categories in a moment, because the player actually does go into the engram section. But I just wanted to show you this that I thought was really cool, where we get to see that there's a wooden axe and a wooden pick, and then there's a stone axe and a stone pick, which is really interesting and begs the question, is this game going to end up borrowing elements from Minecraft rather than Ark, where we're going to see multiple tiers of different tools? I think that would actually be fantastic if eventually it's like you had to have the second strongest pick to mine the second strongest ore, or maybe even the strongest ore, in order to get yourself the strongest tool possible, maybe some type of azurite or something like that, rather than just, oh, you just go up from wooden tools up to metal, and that's pretty much it, right? So it really, really cool. Hopefully we end up seeing the game progress in that regard. I could see that happening with a lot of the armor and all the weapons and everything like that as well. But we get to see right here, you know, there's a couple different crafting tables and stairs and stuff like that, as well as fire pits and all these different categories. But again, we'll talk about that in a minute. And it's important to note that this torch right here is going to be a torch that you carry, because what the player is going to actually try to do in this next clip is set up a standing torch, which is going to end up being a separate resource, unfortunately. So your inventory is going to end up getting just as cluttered as it does in Ark as well. So it's a little disappointing to say the least. But we get to see the engram page right here, and this is where things get really interesting, man, because you can see right at the bottom of the screen, I don't know why it's highlighting level 45, but level 80 is going to be the actually like the maximum for a player, which is really, really cool. And then we get to see different tiers. So this is obviously going to end up being the different skill trees of the game, which is really, really cool, where we get to see this is primitive skills. So this is going to be where those different tabs are that I was talking about: exploration, fight, structure, produce, traffic. I'm not sure what traffic is, but either way, we get to see a whole bunch of different things. Cooked meat is going to be a recipe, campfire and stuff like that. Apache saddle is going to be the first saddle that you can actually construct. And you'll see in a minute what the patchy creature actually is. I'm guessing that's going to be the first mounted creature that you're going to be able to get in the entire game, which is really cool. Rope ladder, spears, and stuff like that. So the rope ladder was something that was actually introduced in Ark's desert downloadable content. So it's cool that we get to see a lot of those things and a lot of the experience of Ark taken into Pixark and kind of more balanced, because a rope ladder should be something really early on that you end up getting. Speaking of slopes, we can actually see a thatched ceiling right here is going to end up being a corner block. The reason this is relevant is because what we were wondering when we were over analyzing the trailer like a month or two ago is whether there was going to actually be sloped blocks, but now we actually can confirm that those are there. There's going to be wood chairs, doors, and stuff like that. And I actually really like the way that this system works, where you can see it's just level 0, and then to the right is just going to scale higher and higher levels, and you get to actually click and drag to the right horizontally, rather than in Ark you would end up scrolling down, and it ended up getting pretty confusing. Now we get to see metallurgy right here. I'm guessing that's going to end up being, you know, like metal armor, metal tools and weapons and stuff like that. That's going to be that skill tree. Industrial is going to obviously be for like jetpacks and guns and stuff like that, and electronics. So it's cool that we're going to get to see like all these different skill trees actually having different gameplay. So metallurgy, for example, obviously you're going to have to be going and mining and getting lots of metal and stuff like that. Whereas the industrial one, you're probably going to be focused more on maybe the ocean and getting oil and stuff and gas and fuel. And then the magic skill tree we know nothing about, because that was obviously something that wasn't in Ark, but I'm guessing it's going to be some of the other magic crafting tables that we've seen before, as well as staves and magic and stuff like that. And then architecture mastery, which I guess is, you know, based on the image that we actually see right here, maybe that's going to end up being pre-built walls and structures and stuff like that, or maybe it's just going to be items that have certain functionality. But I do like the fact that it does show like a building crane, which does imply to me that the building potentially could end up getting much easier as you end up going down that skill tree, because as you'll see later in the video with the building is very, very basic, and actually is a little bit bad considering that this is a voxel game being released in 2018, and it's actually got worse building than Minecraft. So skipping a little bit further ahead here, you can actually see this pink creature that we're coming up on, and it's actually called Wild Female Patchy at level 3. So that's going to be the first creature that you're going to be able to actually mount, which is really, really cool. And then the player's going to end up going into this area, placing down torches, and does confirm that fuel is going to end up being a thing in Pixark as well, where you don't just simply place down a standing torch, you're going to have to place down a standing torch, but also put fuel into it for it to actually operate, which is really interesting because the lead developer seems to be all about making this game, you know, micro Ark is kind of the best way to put it. Where the lead developer was saying, even as far as taming creatures are concerned, you're only going to be able to have a creature tamed for 3 days before it just goes wild and isn't tamed anymore. That said, I'm hoping that we can actually change that in the settings, like with dinosaur taming and stuff like that, because that was one of the biggest things about Ark that was so fun, was the fact that you could just tame every single dinosaur and kind of hoard them off into your base and kind of do this whole Pokemon try to collect every single thing that you've ever come across, right? And to take that away from Pixark is a little bit of a weird decision. I understand what they're going for, where it's supposed to be like a smaller version of Ark, but I do find it to be very strange that the lead developer seems to want the game to be more focused on capturing a wyvern for a raid and for a very specific quick little function, rather than actually being able to keep it as a permanent pet that feels like an ally, feels like something that you've been through, and leveling up the pet and stuff like that, right? Like how is that going to end up working? So now we also get to see pterodon gameplay, where the character actually is riding on a pterodon. Actually, like, this is so awesome. In the first person, you can see that clearly the person playing didn't mess with the field of view settings. Obviously, that's going to be a thing. But when they go to third person, in 3, 2, 1, boop! Isn't that beautiful? Like, seriously, I love the third person in this game. That's probably how I'm going to be playing this game for the most part. Most of all, that's what you do in Ark anyways, is you switch between third and first person over and over again. And when we end up landing right here, you can actually see that over on the right, what is that? A werewolf, a night creature, is just going to show up out of nowhere, be level 18, and absolutely destroy his pterodon. And then we also get to see some magic gameplay right here, and you can see that he's got 3 out of 83. So the way that the tiers, or not tiers, but stocked ammo is going to end up working, near as I can tell, is if he fired that last shot of magic, it would suddenly count down from 83 to 82, and then he would have a full charge. So it's like, you'll get to see in a minute when we end up getting to see the player using the drill later on, that's kind of how the drill ends up working, where when it gets to 0%, it ends up taking one of the tiers or one of the reloads out of it. So now, anyways, more interesting than that, we get to see some underground gameplay. Get to see that the bloom that plagued Ark is actually still in Pixark as well, and kind of makes it a little bit blinding when you're right up close and personal with blocks and stuff like that. This is a little bit of a preview of the building, so you can see that it's not necessarily ideal as far as placing blocks down to give you that little bit of a survivability. But one thing that is really cool is as soon as the player ends up looking over to the right in any minute here, you're going to see there's a spider right there at level 58. Now, this area that the player is hanging out in is just, there's that bloom. Look at that. It's crazy blinding. The player is actually hanging out in the same area that we saw 2 seconds ago, meaning that the caves are actually very, very deadly and seem to have like really high level monsters. It could just be maybe this biome generated with that. I don't know. But now we're going to get to see that drill gameplay right here. The drill is going to end up drilling 4 blocks in front of the character, and also running water is going to be a thing. Swimming is going to be a thing as well. And cool enough is we get to actually see what the water actually looks like. Obviously, it doesn't really look that realistic when we're talking about like how dark the world is compared to how bright the water is. Like, it just is very unnatural. But that said, it does look very beautiful. Like, that's pretty much all we get to see of the water, unfortunately. But I love it. Like, as far as voxel water is concerned, I really like the way that it looks, and the fact that it does actually have that kind of glow to it means that caving and stuff could potentially end up being a lot easier if you ended up having a stream of water behind you. But why would you need to? Because you got a mining hat, right? Which obviously is going to end up potentially being very disorienting for the character, but still very, very cool. Love to be able to see the water in action. So now this is pretty much going to be the last bit of the gameplay that we actually get out of this video, where the player is going to end up building a house. You saw that little rabbit creature right there, which is absolutely adorable, and this is kind of where I would really, really hope that going into the skill tree that's going to end up having you build more, you know, structures and stuff like that. Hopefully that's going to end up making building easier, because otherwise the game is going to be very similar to Ark, where you're going to have to actually put down a foundation block in order to build blocks on top of it. You can't just build out in the world unless it's like just dirt and stuff like that for some weird reason. But just, you could just see, like, not only is the person that's playing this game really, really slow at video games, don't get me wrong, but the fact of the matter is that the building itself seems to be very, very slow paced, which there's no real excuse for that in this day and age of a voxel game that's actually coming out in 2018. Like, it's just, I don't know, like, there's something about where I'm just sitting here going, wow, really? Like, really? That said, it's definitely better than Ark's building, and of course, you know, if we end up seeing Steam Workshop being implemented into the game eventually, hopefully at day 1, that would be really awesome. But we're obviously going to see modders take the cake as far as like how you actually build structures and stuff like that. Hopefully it ends up just being a lot easier, where you could end up having maybe a 5x5 wall that you could just put down and outright, and that's it. But as we're going to skip a little bit forward into the gameplay here, you can see that the player is still having a bit of a hard time placing down these blocks, because you're going to have to do the old school Minecraft way, where if you want to build anything over 3 blocks tall, you're going to have to actually climb on top of the blocks themselves so that you can actually see that 3rd block and actually plant down the walls themselves, right? However, now we actually get to see one of the new items, which is going to be in the magic skill tree, a thunder totem. Now, what this is going to end up doing is operating the same as a turret. So essentially you end up placing it down on the ground. It's going to have a limited amount of charges, and it's going to end up causing damage to enemies that end up coming nearby, whether they're passive mobs like this dodo that's going to actually get wrecked in 2 seconds. And you can see on the hotbar as well, we get to see like a full-on like catapult and everything like that down there. But anyways, if we fast forward a little bit more, last but not least, we're going to be able to see the character actually using the drill. And it is still cool that we actually get this drill functionality, because it does mean that we can kind of terraform the terrain a little bit faster than vanilla Minecraft anyways. And I really, really hope that we can start seeing more and more tools like this implemented into the game. Not to mention just Steam Workshop, but even the vanilla game would be really, really cool. Anyways, folks, that's pretty much gonna do it for me. Now, Pixark did end up making a tweet recently saying that they are at a gaming convention event right now, meaning that we could possibly see more Pixark gameplay coming out in the weeks to come before it releases in March 27th. So really, really cool. Hopefully we get to see more, but until then, we're gonna call it here for today. So thanks so much for watching. Very much appreciate it. Don't forget to like, share, favorite, and subscribe for more daily content. And if you want to support me, there's links in the description to my merch store, as well as Gawkbox, which is the way that you can actually donate to me for absolutely free. Sign on and stay epic, everybody.